There's a lot that we can learn from the pros, but there are certain things that we need to adapt. Specifically, I'm talking about nutrition. If we don't train like a pro, how can we expect to fuel like one? Spoiler alert, we can't. We can, however, learn to optimize our nutrition and adapt it to our specific circumstances. And I've found the perfect person to help guide us. Hint, she works here. This is Tash, a sports scientist at Precision Fuel and Hydration and a top-level age group athlete who has just qualified for the 70.3 and Ironman World Championships. So I think she's got a lot that we can learn from. Well, Tash, I'm going to dive straight in with a question which I feel is appropriate to a lot of age groupers out there. Say most of your training sessions are less than an hour, but you want to practice with your race day fuel, yet you don't need it for that time. What does one do about that?
It's
How
tricky.
do you prepare?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to sort of balance and make a recommendation from, because, you know, if you say I've got an hour on the bike with a few intervals and, you know, I don't really need to have, let's say 90 grams an hour, but in the race, that's my aim. It's like, well, if you want to race well and you want to perform well, you should be fueling these sessions in the same sort of way. I mean, if you're doing a 30-minute jog, I might tell you otherwise, you know, you probably don't need to fuel that hard. But, you know, even going into races that we've seen with pro athletes, we sort of say, and age groupers, we say, like, as best you can, replicate that race day nutrition in any training session you can. And if you know that it's got some race pace efforts, whether that's Ironman 7.3, whatever it is, that's the time to sort of train your body, because that's time that you're going to be stressed, your heart rate's going to be a bit higher. Okay. You know, you want to say to your body, this is when I want to use the fuel. And that's how you get used to it.
So even for like an hour on the bike, you think you would, if it was like, give us an example, like where's that level of when would you not and when would you, where's the cusp?
Yeah, I think in the last 8 to 10 weeks before your race, you need to start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do on race day? If I know I'm going to use gels, fine. These need to be incorporated into your exercise sessions. And if that is, and the sessions I'd say is like, if you know you have, I don't know, 2x20 at Ironman power or something, that is a key session. Any key race pace session is the kind of one you want to be facilitating and you know, encouraging your body to use the fuel in. If you said, oh, I've got 60 minutes easy aerobic, whatever, I'd be like, okay, just fuel well around that one. It would be the difference between tolerating it on race day and maybe having some stomach issues.
Okay, yeah, that does make complete sense. Now, on that topic of, should you be changing your diet? Because obviously if we're using these high carbs in a session, whether it's 1 hour, whether it's 2 hours, yet the rest of the day we're quite sedentary, it's a fine line of, it's so different to being the pros, because it's not about how much food we can eat. We need to eat more,
Yeah.
but we want to practice with that. How do we make sure that we've still got enough capacity to take calories on and get nutrients as well as carbs?
Yeah, I think the bottom line for this is, if you're doing an exercise session in a day, it's unlikely that even if you fueled at 90, 100 grams of carbs an hour, you'd still be in an energy deficit following the end of that session, because 90 grams an hour versus how many calories you're actually burning don't equal up. So as long as for the rest of the day you're not just sort of eating everything in sight, which is where the fueling comes in really helpful, the better you fuel during, the less sort of snacky, let's say, you feel afterwards, because your body's not searching and hunting around for food. It's just like, actually, I feel pretty satisfied right now. I can just eat my normal meals and I can have the fruit, the vegetables, the nutrients, everything that you need to sort of enhance your recovery and get ready for the next day.
Okay, I mean, that does make complete sense. And you've touched on it, but where does real food fit in with our training, and also, you know, the element of enjoying different types of food but trying to practice with the product?
It's, again, that's a tricky balance, and a lot of age groupers and athletes are choosing to have some real food in their longer races. So even you see people in their 70.3s having flapjacks, rice bars, sandwiches, you know, sweets, that kind of thing. And it's absolutely fine. But whatever you pick to have on race day, use in your training. And the same way we'd say, you know, you're aiming for between 60 and 90 grams an hour, understand what's in that food that you're having. So if it's Haribo's, for example, you know that a handful is X number of carbs, and then understand that in your training sessions, you should be trying to replicate that same intake, just using those foods. And it is fine, it's doable. And if you can tolerate it because you've practiced it, you're better off than most. But the difference is, and the reason we encourage sports nutrition is, it's easy to digest, it's easier to absorb, it's literally built for a reason to make it more easy for you on race day. So it's a balance of maybe having some sports nutrition and some real food if that's the route you want to go down. And it gives you more variety, you know. Having gels all day for a 12-hour Ironman is tough. Adding in some, I don't know, Haribo's, Percy Pigs, something like that can really, it can boost morale and it can just sort of motivate you a bit further.
And can we touch on a little bit of, you know, sports nutrition is brilliant but because there's so much science behind it, it isn't cheap. And if you're fueling all your sessions and you are training for an Ironman, you know, that's a lot of training. Is there some way that you would suggest, like, when do you prioritise using nutrition product and what else can you use to sort of almost help buffer and sort of manage the costs of that?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned previously, in the last, let's say 2 months before your race, when it's becoming pretty critical that your sessions are probably peaking up in volume, they're getting a bit harder, you're getting to peak week of mileage and all of that, that's when your body needs to understand, like, this is what I'm going to do on race day. And if you're spending however much money on an Ironman entry or a race entry, spending a little bit more on those products to just facilitate, you know, the ease of yourself and actually racing, I'd say that's far more important than just thinking, okay, I am going to lose a little bit of money here.
Yeah.
But if it was an either or, I'd say any race specific session, and you'll know from your training, you know, if I've got a 3-hour ride with a 30-minute brick run, that is race specific. You know, you're matching what you're going to do on race day. That's the time to be thinking, right, gels, chews, drink mix, you know, the things I want to use on race day. But, you know, your easy ride or your jog down the road, like, you can sort of ease off on those ones.
Yeah, that sounds very, very sensible, like, realistic approach for sure. All right, I've got a little prop for my next question just because. So my fueling is a mixture of gels and, like, a few sweets, no brands talked about here. But I know, obviously, I can look at the packet and I can see the amount of carbs on this, but how do we know about the ratio of glucose to fructose? And obviously that is now becoming something that's talked about and how it's easier to absorb. Like your typical sweets from the garage, what are they looking like in their breakdown between glucose and fructose, and how does that compare to sports nutrition products?
Yeah, I think, and you know, it's going to be different whether you pick up whatever product it is or a different packet of sweets. And generally what we see compared to sports nutrition products is the higher percentage of fructose. So there is more fructose in sweets than in most sports nutrition products because, you know, your average gel is going for a 2-to-1 ratio normally of glucose to fructose, whereas these sort of sweets will be closer to 1-to-1. So if you wanted to optimize your intake and actually what you can use, and you've just had some testing on that to see, you know, what I can actually use during this intensity, if you're aiming for that 2-to-1 ratio, you probably won't be maximizing it ideally with sweets, but you can still use them within that, but you would want to get some more glucose, realistically, into your strategy to get that ratio more aligned with where the research is.
I think that's a really interesting aspect, something that I haven't really thought about until recently. But on that, can you still incorporate it? Because my first Ironman, or one of the advice from an ex-pro, she was like, have some sweets as a treat at a certain point in your race. Do you still recommend actually incorporating that as almost like a reward or to help with flavour fatigue as well?
Yeah, definitely. Anything that helps you mentally or even physically, you think it's a bit of a break from having that gel or whatever, and it's enjoyable and it boosts motivation, and you think, I can go again now. It's do it. It's a no-brainer. And we talk about optimizing carb intakes and all of that kind of thing, but if the goal here is just to get through the race and enjoy it as well, ultimately, as well as race the race, then having something like that as well as the other products you're using is absolutely fine.
Nice, cool. Got the green light on my tweets. I'll put them away for the moment. I think a common dilemma for age groupers is we're training before work, after work, often early mornings, and that's often when you want to get the hard session in, but you've just woken up, you want to fuel, but the thought of having even sweets or gel or anything is quite hard to stomach, so to speak. What recommendations for morning training and fueling do you have?
It will depend on the exercise session that you're about to do. If you say you're going for as I said before, a 30-minute jog, you, as a male, could definitely get by. As a female, I'd say I'd strongly advise that you're having something, whether that's half a banana, a couple of strawberries, literally anything that you can stomach, because the issue with fasted training as a female is it's quite stressful on your body. But generally, if you're doing anything intense, you want to have something maybe an hour before, even if, sliced toast with honey, because then you've got glucose, a bit of fructose. It's kind of the ideal combination to get you started. If you're that against it and it's not going to be disruptive to your hormones, if you are a male, think about what you're having the night before. You know, you need to be thinking ahead. Okay, tomorrow I've got a high intensity interval session on the bike. My dinner needs to be pretty high in carbs to support glycogen restoration and get me ready for that session. Ideally, everyone would be having some carbs, and it's all it needs to be. You don't need fat, you don't need protein, you just need a bit of carbohydrate, get you through the session. And worst case, get on the bike, start fueling once you're training, or even in the run, you know, have some drink mix in your bottle by the poolside. It doesn't have to be before, but it lowers the body's stress levels, and it's far better to do it than to be like, oh, I'll just have breakfast after, because that's just delaying the recovery process.
So guilty. I'm sat here going, yeah, I know I should. And then fast forward to the other end of the day. So you've got a late session, and often, like, especially if you've done a hard run or something, you're not hungry. Should you just feel like then actually emphasize feeling through it more and not worry too much about the evening meal, or should you go to bed later? And like, has there any recommendation on the balance of that? Because it is a balance of trying to get sleep, trying to get recovery.
Yeah, I mean, having a big meal late in the evening is going to disrupt your sleep, which inevitably will affect your recovery. So it's a fine line between what's best for getting out of this session and also what's best for like getting ready for the next day and sleeping. And I'd say if you've got time, whether that's sitting on the train, you know, on the way to the track or whatever it is after work, have something rich in carbohydrates, whether that's sweets, a gel, a banana, you know, whatever you can think of, some rice, anything. Fuel during that session as best you can. If it's a couple of gels, if it's not, you know, sort of whatever works for your body. And then afterwards think, okay, I need some carbs, I need some protein pretty quickly. If you can't stomach a whole bowl of pasta and chicken or whatever it is, a recovery drink, a bar, something is better than nothing. Yeah. Just don't finish a session and then go straight to bed, because not only that will probably impact your sleep more than
wake up
eating
hungry or something. Yeah.
And it's just, you know, if you have something on the next day, you've probably sabotaged that training session. And the goal here isn't, you know, I'm not going to try and maximise every single session to the best ability, but the average across the week should be like, I've ticked most boxes here, I've done the best I can, and just get through that instead of, you know, okay, I just won't eat after the session and feel awful the next day.
All right, Tash has answered all my questions so well. She's made me do a little bit of self-reflection through that. And I was debating whether I do this bit on camera or not, but I've decided I'm going to be open and honest with you guys and share my fueling from my recent race where I qualified for Worlds. Now, you know that I want to try and get my best performance possible. So I have given these numbers to Tash, and now I'm going to see what her honest opinion is and what I need to work on. Now, having like sort of seen it written like that, I was originally quite proud of this nutrition. I'm now a little bit embarrassed about it, but you know, my biggest fear was trying to balance like not needing a loo stop, not getting a stitch, and also having enough energy. And I feel like I ticked all of those, but be nice to me. Start off with what I did right, and then maybe tell me what I could do better.
I mean, you fueled and you had some hydration during, and that's a box that not every athlete going into a race will tick. You know, some people will get by, and it's a phrase I like to use with a lot of different athletes. I'd say like, you can get by on that, and you did, and you performed well, and you said you got PB, which is,
I mean, it was a quick course, but
it's still impressive. And that's a difficult one, because when someone has that kind of response from a race and it's really positive, and you think, oh, okay, so I can do this again, I could replicate this nutrition and get the same sort of response. So the good thing is you did take on some nutrition. You had a gel, you had some chews, you had some sweets and that kind of thing, and you had some fluids throughout. And you got lucky and had no adverse issues because of that. When you're racing for 5 hours around there, and you're not even drinking enough to avoid so much of a loss in fluids from sweat, to get outside of this area where we're thinking, okay, your performance is going to start to like really decline. And the bit I say to you is, you did a 5-hour race on very little, and I think I tried to calculate, it's about 32 grams an hour of carbs, which is far below the recommendations and far below what we know you can actually oxidize and burn and tolerate.
Now I have those stats, I know.
So we know that you can double that, you can, you know, double it even more, and you can go up to, let's say, 75, 80 grams an hour if you wanted to, and that would be your body sort of getting everything it needs and using all of that to enhance your performance. So all I say to you is, you could be a lot better.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing. Like, you've done this well on this little.
Okay, you're making it sound a bit nice. A question on the hydration one, because I do, you know, I have done a sweat test and I'm lucky that I know that info. And I was a bit worried because I didn't actually feel, I drank one bottle. I was like, I haven't touched the second bottle, but I didn't. And that was me consciously drinking. yet on the run I still needed to wee. And I was really surprised at that. Is it just circumstantial? Like, you know, the numbers said I should have been dehydrated, but in effect I wasn't.
The problem with people needing to pee and racing and not having loads of fluid, there's, you know, I could say to you, maybe you didn't have enough electrolytes and you weren't retaining any water, you were actually just flushing it out the system and not using any of that. Also, you could have been nervous. Everyone starts to need to pee more when they're nervous, even when they don't actually need it.
Okay.
You could have had more hydration than necessary the day before, the morning of.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't say your body was hydrated in any way. It was just, you need to pee.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And it's just got me thinking, sort of that race wasn't as hot. We don't really know what the conditions are going to be in Worlds. Is there anything generally to people, like nutrition should be changed in the heat? Because I know it's obviously harder to take on carbs, but is there something you should be aware of when you're training for a race that's different conditions to what you train in?
Yeah, if you know it's going to be hotter, you'd want to, at best, you'd want to try and do some training where either it's warmer, you know, you're doing it indoors and you'll get ideally you'd get some support doing a heat focus session.
Yeah.
But carb-wise, yes, it's going to be harder to tolerate the carbs. You'll still be able to use them. I would just suggest drinking more fluids alongside it. Not, you know, combined. Don't have all of your carbs locked into those drinks, because the more you drink, the more carbs you have. And if you're thirsty in a hot race, that could, you know, have some other issues. I'd say try and keep them separate. Have your electrolytes in your bottles, and then gels, chews, sweets for your carbs. And using that, you know, if your stomach's getting a bit, I'm not feeling too good, drink some fluids. Ease off the carbs, drink some more fluids. And slowly your body will absorb the carbs, tolerate it better and adjust. But that is where practicing in training and thinking of those harder sessions where your heart rate's higher, that is so important to get used to it.
Okay, I've got some good takeaways. Well, hopefully you guys have got loads of takeaways from that and some honesty from Tash. But before we let you go, I think I started this video by saying, you know, we can learn certain things from the pros, but maybe not so much in nutrition. Is there anything in particular that we can look at and go, that we want to learn from them, and certain things that we should avoid and leave that to the pros?
Yeah, I think we can do absolutely everything they can do if we try as hard as they're doing. You know, they are practicing these high intakes in all of their training, and they're fortunate enough that there's no cost to that. There's no real issue. They've got people who are sort of handing it to them almost in their training sessions. We're also seeing them have super high carb intakes where, you know, upwards of 140 grams of carb an hour, which is, honestly, they may be tolerating it.
Yeah.
And that is the key word. They have no GI issues associated with doing this. Are they using it? I don't think there's enough scientific evidence or research to say that they can. You know, we are capping out now at like 120 grams an hour, probably maximally. And if you, as an age grouper, want to try and work towards that, fine. You probably will benefit up to that point with the right ratios. Beyond that, I'd say, you know, this is just becoming unnecessarily expensive and possibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So use them doing this as sort of motivation to, okay, they can train their gut to do it, so can I, but just not on the same level, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Well, Tash, we are going to be excited to watch you race at Kona and demonstrate this perfect fueling, no pressure or anything. To you guys, do let me know if there's any aspects of nutrition that you struggle with or bits that you think you've got nailed. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below and I'll be tapping up Tash to help me answer them. Is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching and thanks again, Tash.